it is really hard to apologize well if you're still upset or emotionally flooded about it. And so sometimes it does take some time and some distance to then come back and apologize. But it is almost never too late to apologize for something sincerely.
Welcome back to the You Need a Counselor podcast. This is a show presented by Heart and Solutions Counseling Agency. We release new episodes every Sunday at 5 p.m. Central and encourage you to batch up that laundry, put away the dishes, plan for the week ahead, or do any other task that might seem daunting while you give our show a listen. You might just be encouraged to call your therapist, connect with this week's guest, or seek out those services you've been considering for a while but haven't made the commitment to yet. If you are in the state of Iowa and are in need of mental or behavioral health counseling, give us a call at 1-800-531-4236. Enjoy the show.
Hello, and welcome back to the You Need a Counselor podcast. My name is Dr. Julie Johnson. I'm the president and founder here at Heart and Solutions, mental health counseling and behavioral health counseling here in Iowa.
And I'm Chrissa Hunt. I am our vice president in charge of the behavioral health department. And this is our podcast, You Need a Counselor. So we are a podcast designed for people curious about counseling, but have barriers keeping them from experiencing the benefits of counseling. Our mission is to share stories about counseling, good, bad, and indifferent, and spread the message that everyone can benefit from mental health and behavioral health counseling services.
Our guest today joins us from West Virginia. We've got Cheri Timko here with us today. Cheri is a couples therapist, a sex therapist, and a relationship coach. She's got over 25 years of experience in the field working with couples, helping them to go through the ups and downs of relationships, the roller coaster that is being part of any couple or any relationship. She uses Gottman couples therapy. She uses neurodiverse couples therapy. She uses sex therapy techniques to help couples that she works with. So welcome, Cheri. Thanks for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a delight to talk to you guys.
We are so glad you're here. So we are very interested in what is couple sex therapy? Because we don't hear about that very often in the general field, and I think it's very interesting to hear about.
Yeah, it would make sense if all couples therapists were also sex therapists, and sex is such a big part of being in a long-term committed relationship. So it just makes sure that we talk about those intimate parts of the relationship, not just make changes in communication and problem solving and living well together. It's also making sure that they are intimate with each other in ways that are satisfying for each partner.
Yeah, absolutely. And so you do that as well as a relationship coach. Can you kind of talk about the difference between those two services?
I have my therapy practice and then I have my coaching practice. My therapy practice is bound by geography. So I can work with clients in those areas where I'm licensed. And therapy tends to be more focused on problems. People tend to come in with higher level of distress or crisis. They tend to come in with, I don't know, global distress. Whereas in the coaching, I am not bound by those same geographical lines. And I also focus more on like a particular issue. Like I have a program which is about bringing back the spark to the relationship. So there's a lot of things that aren't covered in that, but that's really focused on that. And then I'm also able to create resources there. So like I have workbooks that are targeted to specific problems couples might face.
Wonderful. Yeah, it's always nice to hear examples of how might somebody know that a couples therapist or a sex couples therapist might be helpful to them in their relationship.
I would say I'm pretty biased because I think that couples do better when they're proactive about issues. Every couple's going to have some cracks in their relationship, and they can deal with those cracks when there's a crisis that cracks it wide open, or they can deal with those vulnerabilities when things are going smooth. And then it's just like prevention and shoring up. So I will own that bias. I've I've been in this field for a long time, and I really think that every couple can benefit from working with a therapist. Now, that being said, most people come to therapy because they're having some sort of a crisis. Very often, it's an argument that got too intense, and then they're having to wrestle with how they deal with that kind of interaction, that kind of stress. There might have been a crisis like infidelity. Sometimes it's around money. One partner has hidden spending habits. Um, but I do also get a lot of couples who come because they're just not satisfied with how the relationship is going. They either feel too much distance or they feel disconnected, or they see some recurring patterns and they want to change those before they get ingrained and become part of how they interact with each other.
Yeah, and I heard you mention that you have a training on like getting the spark back in your relationship too. Can you give us some info on what that's about and maybe a little like sneak peek of what people can learn through that?
This is a passion project for me because to me, this is so much fun. It's aimed at couples who are in roommate syndrome. So, like living together, but feeling disconnected, maybe even function well in everyday life, but feeling like they've lost that spark, lost that excitement in the relationship. And it's structured around 6 dates. And each date, you have some questions that you ask each other that help you identify some problems and deal with some problems and have those more honest conversations. And then you do something fun. And so the pairing of a little bit of relationship work with something fun and connecting, I think is like the perfect balance for couples really working on their relationship. And then it's paired with, I do sessions of teaching on different topics. So I'll talk about working through problems and dealing with conflict and communication so that they're getting some of that skill building at the same time as working on issues and having fun.
I love that. A few years ago, my husband and I, we worked together, and I've got check-ins with everybody that I work directly with every month or every week or every other week for work. And so we thought we don't need to check it. We live together. We're co-parenting together, right? We don't need work check-ins. And a couple years ago, we said, nope, we're scheduling every week. We're having a work check-in because I don't want to have work conversations at dinner time, right? Or in the car on the way to dance or whatever. And then we started saying, you know what? I end up putting things like, hey, we need to figure out this plan for next weekend, or we need to figure out, I end up putting personal things on that work check-in. We need a family check-in. And so we have that now separate from our work check-in. And it really, like you're talking about, having those dates, those kind of times where we are specifically putting aside everything else. We are holding that space with each other. And maybe we have some direction on things we want to talk about or ideas or like this with the dates and the questions. And maybe we don't, but we've got that time together for that. And that has been so helpful to me and my husband in ways that we didn't know it was going to be helpful. So I love that idea. And that can seem a little bit overwhelming sometimes. So the idea of, no, these are the designated dates. These are the prompts. These are the things we're going to talk about. Just takes that little bit of overwhelm out of the idea of sitting down and doing those dates.
I love that intentionality in your relationship. That question about like, how do we operate the best with each other? And I know that doesn't sound romantic and it doesn't sound like, oh, spontaneous, but when you're intentional about how you structure your relationship, then there's space for that spontaneity and that creativity and that feeling to come bubbling up because you're not spending as much of your time dealing with problems. So something like a weekly business meeting where you deal with the calendar, where you deal with the logistics, like who's going to take care of this and who's going to make sure that this kid gets to that place. And here are the things that we need to be on the lookout for. Even if that's like a 15-minute business meeting once a week, like that can just, I don't know, prevent so much conflict and so many points of friction.
It's hard to corral those things that pop up when you're living with somebody, right? Those daily things that like, oh, why do you put this mug here all the time, right? Just those little things that come up, and it can so impact the relationship because when I see that for the hundredth time, right, it impacts my mood or my attitude about it, and it can impact that relationship. But being able to say, I don't have to worry about that right now because Thursday at 6 I'm putting that on my list and I'm going to be like, hey, is there a reason you put this mug here all the time? Right? I keep seeing it, what's going on? And then my husband would be like, no, I thought that's where you wanted it. I'll just put it here. Right. And
Right.
so it allows, like you said, it creates that space where the relationship can just be. And we can be present in the relationship without all of those roommate logistical pieces coming into it. I think that's beautiful. I also love that you talked about infidelity, but you also talked about financial infidelity. Because I think there is, when you talk about a relationship crisis, a lot of times romantic or sexual infidelity is kind of what comes top of mind. But when you talked about hidden spending habits, can you talk a little bit more about that and how that can come into a relationship?
Betrayal can come in a lot of different forms. And most people, when you're not in the middle of it, you think of it in terms of, is your partner sexual with another person? But there's also like, are they talking to someone else? Are they open and transparent about money? Are there hidden things, even with the kids, that can sometimes be a betrayal? Sometimes from the outside, it may not even look like something that would bother other people, but it's still something that then impacts the relationship. And whenever you harm that trust in whatever way that betrayal comes, that's something that needs to be repaired. This is something that I like to teach couples just as a matter of course, is that every couple needs some tools to repair the relationship and they need to use them often. So that may mean making a repair if someone is grumpy and says something that is maybe more harsh than they mean it. When you're in the habit of being accountable, even for those things, and you have tools to repair it, you're less likely to do the bigger betrayals, but you also have some tools if one of you does something really out of character or selfish or dumb and then ends up hurting their partner really deeply. You then understand this idea that you have to repair those things. Otherwise, they just kind of fester and grow and build resentment and add to, eventually get to a point where you're so disconnected or so bitter with each other that it's much harder to repair.
Can you give some examples of tools that you would mean that people would use in a relationship?
Now, the most straightforward repair is an apology. That's one that just about everyone knows, but it has to be a good apology. If you give a bad apology, it sometimes can be as bad as the thing that you initially did that hurt your partner. So a good apology takes accountability. It acknowledges the other person's hurt. It has a plan attached to it about how you're going to prevent hurting them the same way again. And then it actually asks for forgiveness. A bad apology sounds like, I'm sorry, but here's all the reasons why I did it. Or, I'm sorry if you're having trouble with that. Sometimes even just, I'm sorry, doesn't do much to repair it because it's so unknown what exactly you're saying that you're apologizing for. So that's the repair that most people know and most people can like identify off the top of their head. But there are a lot of other repairs. Changed behavior can be a repair. Sitting and listening, understanding your partner's hurt, being there for them can be a repair. There's a lot of other things that also can be repairing.
Absolutely. Uh, we're going through this. I've got a 9-year-old, and we have a lot of conversations about apologies and how to work through those conflicts because when you're 9, everybody always says, well, say you're sorry to this person, right? And so the school and every place where a child is kind of seeing this, a lot of the focus is on you need to say you're sorry, you need to give them a hug or whatever it is, and not a ton of focus on the actual apology, the actual relationship piece. And so if my daughter will come and say, Mom, I'm sorry, I'll say, I appreciate that and I forgive you, but I need to know what you're sorry for. And so then we break that down into the structure, and it's the same as the wise appeal, it's just backwards. And so it has the structure of this is what I did, this is how it affected you or somebody else, and then this is what I will do differently going forward. And then you have to do the thing or don't agree to the thing. And sometimes my daughter will say, this is what I'll do going forward. And it will be something very aspirational and not realistic. And so we'll have to stop at that part too and go, wait, but is it true that you're saying I will wake up at 5:30 every morning for the rest of my life, right? Or whatever it is, right? It's got to be something realistic, right? So that we can control going forward. So all of those pieces of the apology, those are so important for us to learn and practice in ourselves because no partner is going to be perfect at doing that at any given time.
No, and we are our best in the relationship when we're relaxed with each other. That's when you have the best conversations. That's when you have fun. But that is also when you're not monitoring everything you say or think, and things can come out in a half thought. They can come out with a tone. Like, so being ready to kind of take accountability for that and say, all right, here's where I messed up with that, where I just wasn't thinking about that. Let me do that again. That gives you the chance to really repair that. I love the structure that you're using with your daughter. That is pretty similar to the one that I use. The tip that I have for people is it is really hard to apologize well if you're still upset or emotionally flooded about it. And so sometimes it does take some time and some distance to then come back and apologize. But it is almost never too late to apologize for something sincerely. So if you're like, don't do it when you're upset. You're going to give a bad apology. I give a bad apology when I'm upset.
Definitely. I'd like to go back to the roommate syndrome that you talked about. How do you think couples get into that funk? And I know you talked about like your 6 dates and having like homework to go with each of those dates to kind of like get out of that roommate syndrome. But how do you think they even get into it to begin with?
Roommate syndrome. Oh, yes. You definitely, like, we all know when we're in it, right? Because it's not, I mean, it's just let's get work done. Let's do the things. Let's go through the motions. There's just a lot of work that needs to be done in a family, even a couple with no kids. There's just a lot of day-to-day living that needs to be done. And that can distract from the relationship. For a lot of couples, they put a lot of energy into choosing their partner and then committing to the relationship. And then their attention kind of shifts. It shifts back to everyday life. It shifts back to their job or career. It shifts back to kids, whatever those distractions are. And they kind of expect the relationship to just kind of run in the background on autopilot. Like I chose the right person, we have the right connection, and it just is expected to run on in the background on autopilot. And a relationship needs more than that to sustain. So I find that if you don't put enough time and energy into that relationship, that's where you tend to fall into roommate syndrome. The other time is when they have a lot of differences between the two of them, and it's hard to bridge those. So they start setting aside the problems and kind of move on. And what ends up happening is they stop talking about these hard things and they run out of things to talk about. So they have to go back and realign with those things that they were avoiding, and then they can come back together with that passion and excitement again.
Absolutely. Well, and I mean, as somebody with a child, I noticed that as my child was attached to me at the hip, which she still is pretty attached at the hip, but it made it so that our family dynamic now was less to do with us as a couple and more to do with the family dynamic as that was building and changing and growing. And so as our child got older and started to not have to be right next to me on top of me or right that in the same room with us, we my husband and I, we had to start doing things and going, okay, what are things that we like to do as a couple? And so we said we like to go walking together outside as a couple. Like, she's not invited, right? We do it when she's at school. And so because when she comes with us, it's a whole other thing. So
Right.
so we say, okay, what are our couple hobbies? Because we have a lot of uh family hobbies. And we had to say, what are our couple hobbies? Those are different. And so we said, okay, we're going to start trying cooking, right? And so we're going to try starting these things because we know that as she gets older and older, she's almost a teenager. And as she becomes a teenager, her part of this family dynamic is going to be appropriately lessened as she gains her independence. And we don't want our family structure to be dependent on her not appropriately separating from us. We want her to be able to do that, and for our family structure to still be able to be sustainable as she gains her independence. And so we said, we need hobbies and things to do as a couple because that is a separate relationship. But in the beginning, when she was young, it's hard to differentiate between the two.
That is a great example of one of the ways of breaking out of roommate syndrome is when you cultivate those shared activities. I do want to, I guess, remind the listeners that that is not the only way. And this idea that couples have to have a lot in common to have a really good relationship is only one version of how couples can be together. And couples can be really different from one another and still feel close, feel connected, have that intimate relationship if they cultivate other things that build that connection. So sometimes couples will have a lot of different activities, but they come back together and they share that enthusiasm with one another. And so they know what's going on in each other's lives, even if they're not specifically there for the activities.
And having our own individual hobbies as well, right? And the other person, yes, is aware, but I'm not out there in the garage working on cars, right? And my husband's not doing the activities that I do as my own hobbies, but being able to have those connection pieces and go, okay, but this one is ours, right? And these conversations are ours as a couple. So important. I think that's so helpful. And so you use Gottman couples therapy, and you use neurodiverse couples therapy, and you use sex therapy. Can you talk us through kind of what are those terms? If somebody hears that their couples therapist uses these techniques, what can they expect?
To me, these are all intertwined, and I don't necessarily think of them as separate, but it is helpful for someone who's looking for a therapist to understand that couples therapists and therapists in general are trained in specific modalities. We do have some who are generalists or eclectic, and that just means that they pull from a lot of different techniques and tailor it to the person that they're working with, but that it may not come from one or two specific grounded techniques. I am certified in a couple of things, and that means that I know those particular modalities, those particular structures very deeply. Now, I also pull in from other modalities, other treatment techniques, but I really focus on the one that really resonates with me and the one that makes that I see couples getting the best results from. So the Gottmans have done a lot of research on couples. In fact, they've studied 40,000 couples over 40 years. And so I find the techniques and tools that they teach are ones that work with many couples in lots of different situations and kind of have that big picture and that structure of like what really does work for couples. The sex therapy was really important for me because a lot of therapists have trouble talking about sex with their individual clients and with their couples. And it wasn't until I really studied sex therapy that I realized that even I had kind of been glossing over things that really needed to be discussed the same way I would discuss any other issue with them. So that was a really important piece. Um, you can find a therapist who's not a sex therapist who has that set of skills, but most therapists don't. And so if you're dealing with a sexuality issue, either individually or as a couple, it is really helpful to have someone who has that grounding. And then the neurodiverse couples, I didn't realize how I've been working with neurodiverse couples for most of my career until I did training around it and really understood how how big differences between the partners they need to be bridged. Neurodiverse couples therapy is not about changing either partner, but about finding the bridges that allow them to live peacefully together while like while valuing those differences. A lot of the training around couples is not picking up on that nuance that neurodiverse couples need. Um, so I guess those are the three modalities that in particular use. Some of the other common couples ones are like EFT or RLT or um, imago therapy. There's a developmental one. There's a whole bunch of different types of couples therapy. Those are just the ones that I use and why.
What are some of those differences that you see like with neurodivergent couples now that you've like had the training on it? And I know you mentioned like neurodivergent couples need different things out of counseling. What are some of those things?
They need the idea that neither partner is broken. Um, a traditional, the other therapies that work with couples often will identify one or of the partners that their neurodiversity is the cause of the difficulties in the relationship. And they try to get that person to have more empathy for the situation for their neurotypical partner or even the other neurodiverse partner, because often you've got two neurodiversities. And really, that's not helpful to a couple. What is much more helpful is to help them find what their unique relationship is going to look like and to let go of some of those cultural norms that say this is how a couple is supposed to behave, this is how their house is supposed to look, and instead think about how do you find a way of being together that feels good for both of you, meets both of your needs, many of your wants, and builds a deeply satisfying relationship. And once you let go of those cultural standards, then there's a lot of room to create a relationship that really works well for them.
Absolutely. I love the idea of letting go of what we might have as this is how it's supposed to be. This is how we're supposed to do things. One example is like sleeping arrangements, right? There are a lot of couples that sleep in separate bedrooms, and some people hear that and go, oh no, that must be something wrong with the relationship. But so often it means that each partner in or each participant in the relationship has been able to express and had that expression accepted of what they need when they're sleeping. And so, I mean, my husband and I, we sleep in the same bed, but we have completely different blankets because he wants 8 blankets on him and I want one blanket that I kick onto the floor and I have a CPAP on, right? So because of those things, if we said to each other, if we started that whole conversation with, we have to share blankets, right? That's what married people do. We wouldn't be able to get to this acceptance of like, no, he can understand and accept that I need a very light blanket and that I'm likely to kick it onto the floor and I can't help that, right? And that he needs like 8 super heavy blankets on top of him, and that's how he's going to sleep and function. And so by being able to have those conversations and be able to legitimately say, this is how I sleep, this is what's going to be best for me, and taking away that expectation of, well, this is how married people sleep, we're able to come to those agreements and be able to work together on those things. So it's like that with physical things like, oh, how many blankets do we use? But it's like that with, how do we interact with our in-laws? How do we interact with our extended family? How do we interact with our child's teachers, right? All of those things, if we can know ourselves and feel comfortable in the relationship expressing how we are, who we are in that relationship, and if that can be accepted, and then the way that things work can go around and with the flow of who we are as people, then we just have that more cohesion, and we don't have to act in our relationship. I don't want to ever have to act as though as
Right.
something else is true. So
My husband and I had an early experience with toothpaste where we started to debate which toothpaste we were going to use, his or mine. And I didn't like his and he didn't like mine. And, you start to get into this like expectation that you're going to agree on what that's going to be. And we decided that we could have two different kinds of toothpaste and it would cost the same amount. We use the same amount over the course of time. And so that then became the template for how do you find what really works, not come at this with a lot of expectations. And as we added kids to our family, I think there have been times when we had 5 different types of toothpaste in the house, and it just really was no big deal. It was just like, okay, this is what you need, this is what I need. We just adapt to that and then apply that across the relationship.
we have 6 different tubes going at every time because there's 3 of us, but sometimes we need to brush our teeth downstairs. And so we each have our own type downstairs. We each have our own type upstairs because with neurodivergence, especially, all 3 of the members of my family have very different kinds of neurodivergence. And so we all need different things when it comes to texture and when it comes to sensory things and smells and all of that. When it comes to toothpaste is a great example because the toothpaste is very personal. And so it's a great example in allowing for that. Like, yeah.
And how you keep that tube. Like, do
Yes.
you keep keep it closed? Do you roll it up? Do you squeeze it from like just bypassing all of those personal preferences in favor of like, here's a solution that just works for everybody.
Absolutely. And, my daughter's clothing doesn't need to feel comfortable to me because I'm not the one wearing it. My husband's clothing doesn't need to feel comfortable to me. I'm not the one wearing it. So why should we have to pick one kind of toothpaste that feels good to all 3 of us? Love that. What are some barriers that you find that couples may face when coming into counseling?
A lot of people think that they should only go to couples therapy if their relationship is in trouble. And so a lot of couples wait until one of them says, I want a divorce. Now, some therapists believe that that is too late. I have seen couples come back, even one of my specialties is couples who are already separated. So I've had couples who were already divorced who came back, worked on the relationship, really fixed the problems, and then went on to have a very good relationship. So to me, there is not a too late point. The trouble is that the longer the patterns are in place, the more habits you have to break and the more cleanup work you have to do, the more repair work you have to do. So when couples come in sooner, they often come in for a very short period of time fix the thing, and then they go off and they live with those new skills. They live with those new agreements for 20 or 30 or 40 years, as opposed to waiting until there's a crisis and then coming in. And then we're talking about two people, so both people have to agree to come in. So sometimes one partner will want to do some couples therapy and the other will say, we're not there, or I don't agree. And so it is harder when you've got to convince two people to get on the same page when they're not on the same page about other things.
Do you ever do individual counseling for somebody who wants couple counseling, but their significant other doesn't want to join? And how is that
Yeah,
different than for couple counseling?
I do. Have worked with a significant number of people whose partner would not come in. Now, I would recommend working with specifically a relationship counselor or a couples counselor if you want to do that. Because the dynamic with individual therapy is that the individual therapist is on your side. Now, that doesn't mean they're not going to push you out of your comfort zone or question you or anything, but in general, they hear your side of things. They're going to support you in having a good relationship, a good life. And so if your partner doesn't want to come in, there's already that first strike against that other spouse because they're not showing up to do this work. And an individual therapist who doesn't have a relationship or family or couple mindset or training will see that as the other partner is not participating in the solution. So working with someone who has the training around relationships, then every time I work with an individual, I'm also thinking about that spouse who's not there. And I'm thinking about like how they would tell this same story if they were sitting right here. And that changes the way the therapy goes because the person who is sitting in the seat, there's that assumption from the beginning that they're only bringing their part of it and that other part is an equal partner in the relationship, even if there's a reason why they're not in therapy.
Yeah, I like that example too because when you're looking at things from a couples or a marriage and family counseling perspective, that relationship is that primary client. So there are times where if part of a couple is in individual counseling, they might say, hey, it would be great for me if my partner would do everything I ask them all the time and would just like understand what I'm talking about and absolutely from an individual therapy perspective, yes, that would be right. And so we might support that person in those things as we're kind of cleaning up some of the cognitive distortions or things like that for the individual person. But when we're looking at that from a relationship perspective, we might go, okay, but would that be in the best interest of this relationship, right? Probably not. And so there are times where something could be maybe in the best interest of our individual client if we're looking at that person is my client versus a different thing might be in the best interest of this client's marriage or coupling or partnering, and they can be conflicting sometimes, and because you're adding a whole nother person in there or at least one other person in there. So I really like that example. I also really like that you highlight that working with a couples counselor, even if you're separated already, is still useful and beneficial because even if the couple doesn't get back together, that's not necessarily even the goal is getting back together, reunification. If that happens, then great. But even if that reunification doesn't happen, each individual person has now benefited from the repair work that's happened in that session, the relationship building, the relationship repair, and the ability to do that in their relationships going forward, even if they don't reunite with each other. And especially if co-parenting is involved, those repairs that are happening in couples counseling, even if the couple is already separated. What a great point that you're making, that, yeah, it's not too late for that benefit.
Good news, bad news is that our partners don't have like a USB port where we can download the new upgraded software so that so that they meet our needs better. I say good news, bad news, because that would be lovely if my husband did, but man, I would not want him to be able to download a program. So that means that just coming home with a plan of what your needs are and telling your partner, it often doesn't work. You've got to coordinate and collaborate and negotiate so that your needs are met in a way that's also authentic and feels good for them.
Absolutely. Well, if you could give a suggestion to somebody who might be on the fence then about starting couples counseling, what suggestion might you give them?
I would suggest that a lot of therapists now have free consultations. So read someone's website, schedule a free consultation, and ask all of your questions. Ask how a therapist would handle it if your spouse doesn't want to go, or if they walk out of the room and won't talk about it. That gives a really good sense of what you're getting into, what the possibilities are. And therapists are very different from one another. So finding a good fit in therapists is a wonderful way of stepping into that space and having it go well. Other than that, it is hard to take that first step. If you haven't done therapy, even if you've done individual therapy, couples therapy is going to be very different. And I do want to say, if you are experiencing couples therapy and it resembles anything like what you see on TV or in a movie, they are probably not doing a lot that's helping you. A lot of what you see on TV is watching while one partner like tears apart the other partner while the therapist sits there as a observer who then asks questions like, well, how do you feel about that? And what do you think? And that is not quality couples therapy. Quality couples therapy that's effective is something very different than that.
I always think about Wanda Sykes in Bad Moms. Have you watched Bad Moms or Bad Moms Christmas? Wanda Sykes as the therapist in that movie is extremely entertaining and a great example of what you're talking about, where it's not it's not counseling.
In Ozark, the therapist is actually taking bribes from each of the partners, and you can see her like shift the conversation in different directions based on who paid the bigger bribe that week. So, like, what you see on TV is not good therapy.
Absolutely. Great examples. Great examples there. Well, wonderful. Well, Cheri, we are so glad to have you on the show. It's been wonderful talking to you. And Cheri Timko can be found at couplescounselingcenter.online. And then she's also got a blog, she's got courses, she's got workbooks. If you're like, where do I even start? Go check out those different workbooks and courses, because you might hear something like roommate syndrome, like adding the spark back to your relationship that kind of sparks that in you and goes, yeah, maybe that's for me. Maybe that's a great place to start. So you can find her workbooks and programs at cheritimko.com/courses and workbooks. And we'll link both of those links in the show notes of the video. So Cheri, thank you so much for being here. It's been wonderful.
I'm Cheri Timko, and I need a counselor.
And I'm Chrissa Hunt.
And I'm Julie Johnson, and we need a counselor.
And so do you.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to the You Need a Counselor podcast. We are so grateful that you're here. You can also find and connect with You Need a Counselor on Facebook and Instagram. If you've enjoyed today's show, please take a moment to like, review, or leave a comment, as all of these things help others to find and benefit from the podcast as well. If you're in the state of Iowa and interested in mental health counseling or behavioral health intervention services, give us